Hello guys, so welcome back. Today we are continuing with our integration scenarios, or we are trying to explain our already provided blocks and some different contexts what we have on our side, on SAP community side, and trying to help you go through all those steps inside our blocks and together with you test is everything okay what we provided in block. So if I understand correct, Martin, last time we discussed about integration Azure Active Directory with identity management for SAP side, but using business technology platform. Today we are going in the same direction, but with small difference. So can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Exactly, that's right, Robert. So today will be more about doing the single sign-on on behalf of the user. Yeah. So because the application will do the actual authentication for us. Yeah. And that term is quite prominent in the SAP space, yeah, where we do the mapping from the Azure Active Directory entity, yeah, to the one that is like living on the SAP backend system. Yeah. And that's called SAP Principal Propagation, and that's what we're going to configure today for Azure AD, the SAP OAuth server, and actually do then the test and see our entity being mapped. Yeah.
So today, what we have, I think, is also interesting setup because I have the system installed in my subscription, my tenant, yeah, but you are actually configuring Azure Active Directory from another tenant. I mean, this is a nice example how we can also combine multi-tenant, cross-tenant configuration. But I think the same applies if customer have one part of system on premise and they want to go this same integration with Azure, correct? Yeah? You can
exactly,
also combine that. Okay, great.
Yeah, you could do the same thing. You just need line of sight. Yeah. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Then let's get in. So grabbing my towel here and
exactly.
putting the screen share on. So this is lecture 103A. Yeah. So we broke it into two parts because it's extensive already. Yeah. So we're going to do it in 2 steps. Yeah. And as a preparation, you already spun up the S4 fully activated appliance from the SAP Cloud Appliance Library, which is just to make it easy for us, yeah, and also to have a fresh system where we can see what actually needs to be configured to get it working. Yeah, so we don't start on some unknown predefined setup that someone did beforehand. Yeah, so it really comes from a fresh start. Yeah. And it's also great because you can do it with a P user and you don't need to ask your SAP basis admin and have a lengthy process. Yeah, everyone can just get started from here and play with the systems. So. All right. So we're building on top of Martin Replis block series, yeah, which is quite extensive. But with the video today, it will become much easier, at least I think. Yeah. All right, so we will be then going into the system through the remote desktop and starting with the SAML configuration. Yeah? And then we jump into Azure AD, where we have been last time, yeah, creating our app registration, making some specific configurations for this principal propagation part, and then finishing the OAuth configuration on the SAP server, and then finally do the test with a Postman Collection that we shared, yeah, so to make it as easy as possible. All right, then let's head over here and get started. So this is the CAL system. We have the default user, the BP inst, nice secure default password. Okay, and there's the default transaction to get started with the SAML setup, which is the SAML2. And at this point, we already noticed that nothing happens. So it seems like we need to follow up with some configurations here. Yeah? So the very first thing I always check is the SICF transaction, yeah? Where all the communication services are described. Yeah?
Or maybe it's not started. So.
Yeah, or deactivated. Yeah. There's multiple possibilities. Yeah. Okay, so SAML2 at least is active here. Yeah, we're looking at this BC sec. Yeah, and there's the configuration UI as well. Yeah, So this is the one I anticipated that would open. Yeah. So let's see what happens when we say we want to test this. Yes, we want to allow. Okay, looks fine so far. Become one. Okay, so let's move to the more supported browser then.
Yeah, this old image Carl is using.
No edge yet. Yeah. Yes, we are sure we want this. Please let me do it. Click the wrong button there. Advanced. Accept the risk. Okay, so here's the enable support. So we want to create our own local provider. So this is the basic setting, yeah, to get even started.
It's the same what we did on business technology platform actually, and we export that configuration to Azure Active Directory. So we are doing more or less the same here, just on directly on backend system.
Yeah, you could say that exactly. Yeah. So at this point, we need to give it a proper name, and here's already the first area of problems. Yeah, because many customers just put in the SID here. Yeah, in our case, that would be S4H. Yeah. But this causes problems with Azure AD because it needs to be URI compliant. Yeah, so there's either some workarounds that are described on the blogs, or you make it URI compliant from the beginning. Yeah. And changing this afterwards is especially nasty if you have this in many systems and you build your whole authentication infrastructure around this. So this is really a nasty change, yeah, for customers who did this in the beginning. Yeah. Okay, so we keep the defaults. Everything else can stay. Finish. Okay, so far so good. Let's see what the steps should say next. So we created this through SAML 2 and we made it URI compliant. Next, we shall export our metadata. And in here, I described a hint on what to check next, yeah, because on our end, SAML 2 worked from the test click, yeah. If it doesn't, yeah, so calling this transaction might help, yeah, because it then tells you about other nodes in the chain that are not activated, yeah. For instance, the MySSO control. We shall export our metadata from here.
So we are now exporting, let's call it handshake data to Azure Active Directory. And then on the Azure Active Directory, we'll also, after configuration, export the same and import it here on this side. Yeah. Then we have a trust.
Exactly. So we're downloading it. So did it download? Did it not? Pop up, that's why. Yes, we allow it. Save. Okay, there we go. So now we need to go to Azure Active Directory. I think this is the right side, right? Okay, it already logged me in because we had a session from before. And let me double check the administrator, but I think it's the right one. It is. Yeah. Okay, so last time we did business technology platform, yeah, called SAP Cloud Platform here. And today we are looking for the actual backend, yeah, so we choose SAP Netweaver. Let's give it a nice name. And create. It's like the primary job, watching those buttons go from left to right. Okay, so we want single sign-on, and we want this to be SAML-based because that's what SAP supports. And like you rightfully said already, Robert, now we're going to upload. There it is, Metadata 1, add. So it already prefixed the identity that we maintained before. It's giving us the reply URL, but we're missing a sign-on URL that we need to add ourselves. I made a comment here on the config. So since we're not looking at the typical SSO from the web UI, but really to do principal propagation, so we need to configure the SAP OAuth server. And also for the sign-on URL, we are not actually exposing a web interface, but only the authentication endpoints. We just need to make sure that Azure AD is happy and provided with something that is URI compliant, because it will never be called anyways. So let's do that first. So copying here the dummy, and then take the endpoint from here. That one we change here. See, this is the endpoint for SAML 2, but for principal propagation, we need OAuth. So we are overriding with the standard token endpoint provided on the SAP backend. And the rest can stay as is. Save. No, we're not yet going to test. So next, we need to make sure that we have the right claims being sent. And in here, we are relying on the UPN and supply, because on our end, it's the email address, so that we can make the mapping through that. So we're going to have one SAP backend user with the same email address as the Azure AD user. And here's another area of problems, where you could have something else. There's the UPN, maybe that identifies your users. Pay close attention to this setting.
So they must match to each other.
Yeah, exactly. And actually in here, we have colleagues who suggest to use object IDs, which don't have all the problems of the other attributes.
Okay. They're more unique. So.
Yeah, exactly. Also in multi-tenant scenarios, where you then have actually, this should be enough for most cases. So we are keeping the UPN also because it's very widespread to do it like this. Okay. So we're happy with those settings. Next, we're going to download the federation metadata from here. And also the certificates in base64. And make our way back to the screen.
Okay, so now we are going
concluding the handshake, as you put it before. So we choose now the OAuth identity provider here on the SAP side, and we're uploading the metadata. So this was the name, right? And here we upload the certificate. this is the one. Or it's not. Did I paste
Today's date.
Okay, verification not
I
successful.
think we forget to put the user there in application.
Well, at this point, the metadata should be enough to import
Okay.
export. Yeah.
Because he's testing, maybe he's just trying to ping something up.
No, so maybe I put in the wrong metadata. Maybe let's clean up the downloads to be sure. So this is the one that we imported. Cancel. So we download this one again. And the certificates. Okay, previous. Interesting. So we're giving it the local certificate, but it's
Back to Azure configuration, maybe we
overlooked something.
Post the cost in a copy paste. Classically, copy. Part is wrong.
Color for HCI.
Logout really is, I think, is not important. Yeah, because
no, it's not. Yeah. So we care about this URL.
Yeah.
And we care about the entity ID. So the so from here VH cal S4 HCI and this port. Is the port wrong? No, it's not. But we had 01 at some point, didn't we? Okay, let's quickly check.
Yeah, I think it's our 01. I think correct. I think.
Yeah. No, it's 00. So what else could it be? Maybe some strange refresh issues. Because those two need to match for sure, yeah. So I'm wondering what's going on here. So the new one, upload from file, and the local copy. There you go.
So what is different? You just did the refresh on. Okay.
Yeah. So
nice. I mean, we promised that we will continue if we face some issues. So this is very nice. I think we have no idea what happened, but okay. If someone faces the same issue, just try to refresh the page. On I don't know. I mean,
I had this before. Yeah. When you are when you're very quick in making those configurations and then start downloading.
Maybe. Okay. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. So maybe it's worth after you make the configuration here, just to do a refresh before you actually do.
Yeah, because maybe he's already generated those files. Okay, whatever. Yeah, creating too much assumptions. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Refresh helps. Yeah.
Okay, exactly.
So now we were able to finish that part. So we hit edit here again to add the name ID format. Yeah, we configured. We left the UPN as email address. Yeah, so we keep email. And in here, there's like a couple of options, yeah, with alias and unspecified name ID formats. There's quite some content around this, yeah. But for us, it's enough to take the email ID format and take it from the name ID because the UPN is the same, yeah. Okay, so we can save this. And at this point, we already enable. So let's make sure that we have at least one user that matches. We did the VP inst, right? So let's give him the email address of the administrator that we've been using all the time for now. So that's it. So let's check on the description. So I believe we downloaded, imported already in the OAuth server. So we finished this part of the mix. And next would be actually making sure that we have a client that is registered on Azure AD. Yeah. So we can go back there. So in here, this enterprise application represents our Netweaver system, yeah. And now we are going to create an app registration to act as a client for this one. Yeah,
yeah, it's like a service user, so to say.
Your client server architecture, maybe. Yeah? And be aware that we also have an app registration for this S/4HANA system. Yeah, so there's always a pair of the enterprise app and the app registration when you do this for Netweaver. Yeah, so have a quick look what's in here. So we can see there's a redirect URI, some tokens that are supported. Doesn't add any configuration for the API permissions, but there's a scope that is registered here, yeah. And in here we will have to add our client next. Yeah? So let's start adding our own new app registration as a client. All right. So far, so good. So in order to be able to authenticate on this one, we will also need to have a client secret pair. Yeah? So let's keep this on the side. And also we're going to keep the application ID, or we can do it next when we do the Postman setup, yeah, in one go. Okay, so there's a default permission, yeah, for this, so at least it can read user profiles, yeah. So that comes with every app registrations that we have. But we will need a couple more, yeah, so that we can do the actual configuration. So at least we need OpenID Connect, yeah. So we can simply search here. I think OIDC. Oh no, it's open. There it is, yeah.
Okay.
Which is required for signing in users, yeah. So let's quickly check on the description where we are. So we need for the reply URL, we need this. And on the web profile, also an application ID URI.
We built now authentication. Now we are building authorization over OpenID. Correct? This is a combination of. Okay.
Very true. So now I forgot where I wanted to go. So, and I wanted to do the reply URL. Okay. And that one is here, isn't it? It is. So we add a platform now. And since this is a web interface, putting it here. And this is the default OpenID Connect URL endpoint, yeah, from Azure AD. And since we want to test from Postman, we're also allowing certain token endpoint flows from here. Yeah? But you wouldn't require this if you do this with an OData client or anything else, yeah? Just because we want to interact in a certain way from Postman. Okay. Looks good so far. Next. Now the web profile, expose an API and create the application URI from, no, not expose an API here. Because in here we don't have anything yet. So we're setting the default, yeah. So it already suggests to take our application ID and prefix in a certain way. Yeah? So we just keep it as is. And to finish, we also need to give it a scope, yeah, to have a meaningful authentication setup. This one we can call whatever we want, yeah. It could be dummy, for instance, yeah, or something more meaningful like SAP read maybe, yeah. Or since we are doing read write as well. And add that. All right. Looks good so far. We already gave it the OpenID configuration. So next, we are going to add this this client to the server component. Yeah, so we're moving one step back and going back into the app registration of the backend system. And in here, under expose an API, we're going to add our new client and like finish that part of the chain of the handshake. Yeah? But I should have copied it from. So let's open a new tab. So there's the client already. Let's copy the application ID from here so that we can actually supply it here. So now we have like finished the duo here, yeah, between the server and the client on the Azure side. Yeah? All right.
So what we did, we created trust between two identity management systems. And now inside the trust from Azure perspective, we say we create application and expose one part of API which we want to somehow be able to communicate with any client on SAP side.
Exactly, yeah. So, and in order to actually become testable, yeah, we need to finish the SAP OAuth server setup. Yeah. So we now go back to the SAP backend, and we already created the trusted OAuth IDP, yeah, and did the name ID stuff. But we actually need to give it the target OData service that we want to be able to authenticate on. Yeah. So, and this is the demo service that each system has shipped, yeah, by default. Yeah, so we're going to use this one, so you don't have to create your own. Yeah? Okay, so let's check. So we did this part already. Now let's jump to the SOAuth2. And for this one, there's also a transaction, SOAuth2. And did I mistype, or is it hiding again for me? /n SOAuth2. See, it's not even opening this time, Robert. So let's do our trick from last time from SICF.
And we had also that issue, and what Windows was hiding, but now.
Yeah, an Internet Explorer and something around this. So let's be clever and try it from here. Of course not. This is the token endpoint. So how do I get now to the SOAuth2? It's a WebDyn Pro and a transaction. Do you remember, Robert, the transaction?
This old name, what you asked me last time? No, I don't remember anymore.
Okay, so then.
But you have it in cache, right? Maybe can you just drop down?
Yeah, that's a good point. At least not here. So let's quickly search then for SAP SOAuth2 transaction. Yeah, we wanted to start the transaction. But it's not about uppercase, isn't it? No, it's not. So I'm quickly checking on my end because I definitely have okay, this is the WebDyn Pro. Do you know the WebDyn Pro transaction code? So then we could also check that one. So keeping here for later, read the ID. Okay, well, we don't know the name of this one. Yeah. Let me do it from here. So I keep the URL and enrich it with name here. So our system seems to be lacking some more basic setup, yeah, so that we can actually call this part of the config. If this opens. Okay, it does. So in here, we actually need to maintain the OAuth client, yeah, which is like a mandatory setup for any OAuth server component. So we already have trust and we already have the IDP, but we still need a user that actually has some authorizations on the SAP backend. Yeah? So, and for this one, we see some technical users in here. So let's provide a new one for this. We call this one maybe keep the notion of the towel client, yeah. And let's create it as a technical user. It will be a system user. I'm giving it a password. and save. And if you did everything correctly, then actually it will show up here on your default values. There it is. Yeah?
So we are now telling the SAP this client will execute in the name of this user, this system user.
Exactly, that's the core at this on behalf of mechanism.
On behalf.
Yeah. So because we have this Azure AD admin user, yeah, and we're contacting the system using this towel user on behalf of the admin from Azure AD. Yeah, exactly. So we keep the settings as is. Yeah. Here's the token lifetime, 1 hour is very typical. Yeah. And we're saying we want the OAuth configuration that we did before, yeah, with Azure AD. Everything else can stay as is. For later configurations, we already enable refreshing the tokens. It's also a very common OAuth topic. Yeah? So you get 1 hour valid token, but once the 1 hour is over, do you actually need to get a new one, or can you do a quicker way of just using the refresh endpoint and getting a new one this way instead of getting through the whole cycle again? Yeah?
Cycle again.
Okay. Okay. So now we need to give it a scope. Let's see. So those are the available scopes on the system, but we want the one for the EPM Postman serve. Here it is already. And if you don't see it here, you can enable from the OData maintenance transaction, which I listed here. Yeah, so you just navigate there, and there's a button enable for OAuth. Yeah. Okay, so we choose it from here. Next. So that means this client, this OAuth client, is now allowed to call this scope. Yeah. So one single data service. Yeah. So at this point, you need to make some thinking, yeah, on strategy, how to enable scopes and how to map to users. Do you need multiple? Do you make very mighty users or not? Yeah.
But I can use the same user, just need to define another scope again,
exactly.
again.
Yeah, exactly. You get a table here. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So far, so good. So I think let's double check, but I think we're ready to test. Yeah, looks promising. So I'm already copying the URL from here because I want to import the Postman collection. Yeah. So let me copy this. We're going back into our system, opening Postman. I thought we installed already. There it is.
So Postman Collection is just your repository of REST API calls.
Yeah, exactly.
Predefined, that you don't need to define it right now and so on. So you just somehow create it already and create collection based on that. Okay.
Yes, and it's very dedicated to each lecture, yeah, so that it's not giving you too many things. Yeah. So we are going to import. I'm saying I want to do this from link. Yeah, that's the one that I just copied from the repo. Yeah, that is shared with all of you. Yeah, so it's also marked as 103A. There we go. And in here we have 4 requests to finish our test. Yeah, see if the whole setup is working. So let's start with the first. Or before we go there, let's have a quick look at the variables. Yeah. So in here we need to maintain a couple of things so that the requests individually can like rely on this and make it a little more dynamic and just a better flow. It's a very common practice to use variables for this. Yeah. So in here we need our SAP Gateway System IP. And in our case, we can take it from here. Yeah. Port. So next, the AAD tenant. We can take it from everywhere within this Azure AD. Yeah, so displays on all the registrations. Yeah, the directory. So this one is the application ID for the actual subsystem. Yeah. So, and this is the client. So we move over to the subsystem and take the client ID from here. Or we move to the front end app, yeah, which is this one. Again, we take the client ID. We need the secret that we created at the beginning, yeah. And I kept it here on the notepad. Okay, so now we need the scope. And that one is defined here, I think. There it is. Yeah. This one. So we copy this one. So that we can actually, when we do the login, do it for this front-end app. And then move on. So in here, now the OAuth client. This one we configured here. It's this user. It's the password that I gave on SU01 before. Yeah? There we go. So the token was already here because I anticipate you use the same OData service as we do in the example. Yeah, that's why I kept it here. And those two here will contain the actual tokens when we do the flow. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So one question. I mean, we now have an example in Postman here, but if I have a real client here, yeah, and I want to use those APIs, do I really need to specify all those information, or there's some automatic way or half automatic way where I can somehow get this metadata from trusted authority? Let's call it like that. Is there any way, different way to do that?
Well, for a client, we definitely need this setup. Yeah. There are parts that you can abstract. Yeah.
Okay.
Because right now we are relying really on a tight coupling. Yeah.
Okay.
But on the next steps, when we do 103B, for instance, yeah, okay, we can save a couple of parts because we put the complexity of this whole setup into Azure API management. Yeah?
Okay.
And once you do that, you only need to configure the client in such a way that it is actually allowed to call this part. Yeah, and then you can forget about all the SAP specific actions of it. Yeah.
And we will do that in next video. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. So, but if you do really a one-to-one mapping here, yeah, then you need to actually supply everything, yeah, to do the whole thing. Okay, so let's save those variables. Save. Doesn't want to save. Okay, maybe then here. All right. So first request. Now you see why the variables are great, yeah, because then there can be resolved here dynamically. And here you see the parameters. Yeah? And we already did the Open API authorization. Yeah, profile was already there, and this is our custom scope, this SAP read write. Yeah? So let's call this one. Okay, came back with status OK. So now we are actually getting ourselves the token with the end user flow for this. Yeah. And since I already had a session, it didn't ask me for Azure AD login, yeah, because we already in here on the portal, right? So it directly gave me the access token here on the URL. Yeah, you see the reply, this default URL, and the access token is part of the URL. And we're only doing this because we want to showcase from Postman, right? So this flow with the URL, it wouldn't happen this way if you do it with an actual client implementation with an SDK or anything. Yeah. So now so here's the end of the token. I'm copying it, closing this one, and moving on to the second request. And the second request, once this this token that we got as assertion here. So I'm overriding this one. And a very common way of checking before you go anywhere is to use a website like .io to check if the token contains all the data that you anticipate. Yeah? So I just copied it here, right? And then it now tells me that my audience is this, which is very first thing that you need to check. Is it actually the app registration that you anticipated? And also interesting, here's the scope. Yeah, is the scope correct? And the UPN, you can see this is the email address, so that will also be important in the next steps. So this is a good way of checking, okay, did I mismatch any of my tenants? Did something get jammed somewhere? And just make sure it's actually there. Yeah. And now I added it here, and we're going to authenticate with the front-end app. Yeah, so that's the ID we supplied. And we are going to go to Azure AD and ask it for a token exchange. Yeah? So at this point, we're saying, here's the OAuth token in JOT format, but for SAP, we need SAML. Yeah, so please exchange it for us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's send this. Azure AD says, yeah, no problem.
Token.
You get a new one. Yeah, there's the access token, which has the SAML2 format. Yeah. And this Postman collection already saves the result in this variable, yeah, so that we can rely on it in the next step. Yeah, so it just takes the access token from here. So step 3. So this already goes to the SAP OAuth server, yeah, with the things that we supplied here. On the authorization, we have the towel OAuth client user. The password is also taken from the variables. And on the body, we are again saying we are giving you a SAML token for the OAuth2 SAML Bureau assertion flow. Yeah, very long word. And in here we have the towel user, and we also need to tell which scope we want. Yeah. And the result again will be saved in this variable. Yeah? So let's send this away. Okay, so we are missing something. And we are missing it on the SAP side. On the audience restriction. Yeah. I think I know, because I always do this wrong. Yeah. The scope here is not complete, right? So this is the one A35. But here it's about the application ID. Is it the other one? That's why it's good we have a video afterwards, Robert, because then I can just look it up, because I always make the mix.
I mean, this is exactly. It's sometimes flow in blocks is just going in one direction, and if something is going wrong, you somehow need to find a way out. And exactly this is the reason why we are recording those videos, to just show that there's a potential many wrong ways.
So let me quickly check to make sure I didn't overlook anything. So we did this. So the default is definitely correct. But the scope in general, because so the ID, what's the ID again? It's AFE. Which one is AFE? This one. Okay. And this one has this scope. Yeah, so if this is wrong, then I will maybe rename this thing, yeah, to make sure we don't have this issue again, yeah. So now we need to request again, yeah, because I changed this variable. Yeah, so Azure AD doesn't care yet, yeah, so we can request for any of those, yeah. But let's see what SAP thinks now. There we go. That was the mistake, yeah.
Oh.
Tricked myself by imprecise description. All right, so now SAP told us, yeah, you're good to go. Here's your access token. It's valid for 1 hour. Here's the refresh token if you want to get a new one after it. And this is the scope that you requested and which I now confirm is correct. Yeah. So now we actually finished the token dance. Yeah, that's how my colleagues who work with this a lot always call it, the token dance. Now we can actually go to the actual data service. Yeah. And for this one, we're supplying only the token, yeah, that we requested beforehand. And we're saying, please go to the product or data service, check the product entity, and just show us the first 10 and also format as JSON output.
But if I now here call something else, which is out of my predefined scope, I will receive the probably access denied from SAP system because this is not registered in my scope, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, we can only call this OData service. We can't call anything else. Yeah, we can actually also make a test if you want to be sure. Yeah, but let's see. Well, there's the result. 200. Okay, so we actually see the products. Yeah. So, but let's choose any of the other OData services. There's actually one that's called very similar as this. IWFND named service. And let's filter by could be at the beginning. So there's a couple of others, yeah. So let's do, for instance, PO approval service, yeah. So if I just adjust it here, PO approval service, right? That's the one. And we don't know yet what is there, so let's call the metadata. Yeah? So we're doing this with the same bureau token, which has a different scope. Yeah. And this goes into unauthorized. Yeah.
Okay, great. Nice.
Yeah. If I do now basic out and I do BP inst and welcome one, that probably goes through. There you go.
Okay.
See, but this is now basic authentication, which we allowed because we are on the same system. We have network availability of this. Yeah? But for single sign-on with Azure AD and Principal Propagation, this is a very different story then. Yeah.
Great.
So far so good. That's it for 103A.
Yeah. Okay. This is nice. So now we have actually once more we established communication between business technology platform and our Azure Active Directory. So not communication, we established the trust between the two, and we also test that it's working over some some nice Fiori applications there. Now we did the same, but in direction of, let's say, classical backend systems. But is there, I think we will next time cover the API management from Azure API management perspective, how to simplify maybe this process. But is there also maybe one scenario where I can say, okay, you know, I will go over the BTP and go over the BTP in backend system, which is also running on Azure. I think we need to have a business connector, or we can also use our private link. Maybe we can also address that scenario later. Maybe not provide the demo, but simply discuss about that, what we need to do to establish something like that.
Yeah, definitely, Robert. Yeah, yes.
Okay,
totally
great.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, we covered now a lot. I think this is a very, I mean, it's a little bit wrong to say it's basic because there's a lot to do, but I think it's basic for any kind of integration from next step in integration direction from SAP perspective, also integration from Microsoft perspective. Is this integration with Teams or whatever? This is somehow basis. Yeah, we need to have this. We need to establish this trust. Nice.
Yeah. And many things can go wrong. Yeah, I'm recommending this transaction, the SAC DRC tool, which actually gives you a very detailed overview of what happened. Yeah, and if the error message just says it's broken, the SAC DRC tool will tell you, well, I anticipated this value, but you gave me this, and then you can actually pinpoint the error much better. Yeah, so this saved me hours and hours. Yeah, so maybe next time when we go deeper, we'll also have a quick look at that one. Yeah?
Okay, great. Then I think we are done for today. Very nice story. I think now we are on the end of one big phase. Next video we'll go a little bit deeper in direction. Okay, how to simplify that using Azure API management. So till next time, Martin. Thank you, and then see you in a next video.
Yeah, see you on the other side. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.